The stars looked different from the bridge of the warship. Commander stood before the massive viewing screen, his four eyes focusing on the small blue planet below. Earth, they called it, the third planet from a yellow star, unremarkable in every way except one. It had life, and where there was life, the Empire could harvest. Analysis complete, Commander, his tactical officer reported. The officer's voice carried the flat tone that all used when discussing business. The planet contains approximately 8 billion sentient beings. Technology level is primitive. No faster-than-light travel. No energy shields. Nuclear fission weapons only. Made a pleased gesture with his upper arms. Standard protocol, then. Initiate harvest procedures. I want collection teams on the surface within the hour. They had perfected this process over 300 years. They had conquered 47 different species across the galaxy. The method never changed. Descend upon a world before it could defend itself. Take what resources the planet offered. Capture the strongest natives and turn them into soldiers. Leave the world broken and empty. On Earth was cleaning his rifle when the sky turned dark. He looked up from the military base courtyard and saw something that made his blood run cold. Massive ships, each the size of a city, were descending through the clouds. They were nothing like human aircraft. These ships were organic-looking, with curved surfaces that seemed to pulse with dark energy. Everyone inside, this is not a drill. His commander's voice cracked over the loudspeakers. Grabbed his weapon and ran. Around him, other soldiers did the same. He had been in the Special Forces for 12 years. He had fought in 3 conflicts, but nothing had prepared him for this. These were not human enemies. This was something else entirely. His sister was in the command center when the first reports came in. She was a military strategist, one of the best in the Asian Defense Network. Her screens lit up with data from every continent. The ships were landing everywhere at once. Beijing, Seoul, Tokyo, New York, London, Moscow. Every major city on Earth was under attack. "What do they want?" someone asked. Watched the screens carefully. The alien ships were not bombing cities. They were not destroying infrastructure. Instead, they were sending beams of light down to the streets. And wherever those beams touched, people simply vanished. They were being taken. "They want us," said quietly. Fighter pilot Wu was already in the air when the orders came through. He pushed his jet to maximum speed, joining a squadron of 12 aircraft heading toward one of the massive alien ships hovering over Seoul. His hands were steady on the controls, but his mind was racing. "Fire at will," the squadron leader commanded. Missiles streaked through the sky. Wu watched as they hit the alien ship's surface and simply disappeared, absorbed by some kind of energy barrier. The ship did not even slow down. It just continued its work, pulling thousands of people up from the city below. "Evasive maneuvers," someone shouted. A beam of purple energy shot from the alien ship. 3 jets exploded instantly. Wu pulled hard on his stick, barely avoiding another beam. His radio filled with screams and static. Within minutes, half his squadron was gone. Was in the hospital when the attack began. She was a combat medic with a degree in biochemistry, working the emergency room when suddenly every phone in the building started ringing at once. The first casualties arrived within the hour. Burned soldiers, people with strange radiation injuries, reports of some new weapon that the aliens were using. She worked quickly, moving from patient to patient. But in the back of her mind, she was analyzing everything she could see. The burn patterns were unlike anything she had studied. The radiation signatures did not match any known source. These aliens had technology that Earth could not understand, let alone fight. By the end of the first day, the battle was over. Not because humans stopped fighting, but because there was nothing left to fight with. Every major military force had been destroyed or scattered. The aliens controlled the skies. Their ships covered every continent. The collection beams continued for 3 days. They took soldiers first, then police officers and athletes. Anyone who was strong or trained in combat was taken on the second day, right from the ruins of his base. He saw the beam coming down and tried to run, but it was useless. The light surrounded him, and he felt his body lift off the ground. Was taken from the command center. She had been trying to organize a resistance, sending encrypted messages to surviving units around the world. But the aliens found her. When the beam took her, she did not scream. She watched everything carefully, memorizing details of the alien technology, looking for weaknesses. Wu's jet ran out of fuel on the third day. He had been hiding in the clouds, making hit-and-run attacks that did no damage but made him feel like he was doing something. When his engine finally died, he ejected and parachuted down. The collection beam found him before he hit the ground. Stayed in the hospital until the very end. She treated wounded people and studied the alien weapons effects until the aliens came for the hospitals too. They took all the doctors and nurses with medical training. She was in the middle of surgery when the beam hit. She managed to finish suturing her patient's wound before the light pulled her away. Inside the alien transport ships, thousands of humans were held in massive chambers. The air smelled strange, like metal and something bitter. Dim lights provided barely enough illumination to see. Found himself pressed against cold walls with hundreds of others. Some people were crying. Others sat in shocked silence. A few, were watching everything with careful attention. He saw his sister across the chamber, caught his eye and gave him a tiny nod. They could not speak, but they did not need to. They both understood what was happening. They were being taken as slaves. The aliens wanted to use humans as soldiers in their empire. But his expression held something else, something the aliens could not see in the darkness. It was not fear, it was calculation. She was already planning. Wu was in another chamber studying the alien guards who walked past. They were tall, with gray skin and 4 arms. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. But Wu noticed they never looked at the human prisoners directly. They seemed to think humans were no threat at all. Good, Wu thought, let them think that. Was watching the other prisoners, particularly those who were injured. The aliens had not provided any medical care. Several people were dying from wounds received during the capture. She began moving through the crowd, using torn cloth to bandage injuries, whispering words of comfort. She was also listening, learning languages from the few non-human prisoners mixed in with the humans. From his flagship, Commander watched Earth burn. His forces had taken everything of value. Approximately 2 million humans had been captured. The strongest specimens his scanners could identify. The rest of the planet's population was left to survive in the ruins. Mark this world as harvested, he told his crew. Set course for, we will begin processing the new slaves immediately. His tactical officer hesitated. Commander, there is one anomaly in the reports. What is it? The humans showed unusual behavior during capture. Most species panic or submit. Humans did both, but also something else. Approximately 12% continued fighting even when it was clearly hopeless. Others went silent and observant. Some even appeared to smile before capture. Considered this. Irrelevant, they are primitives. Whatever behavior they show now will be corrected in training. Proceed as planned. But as the fleet left Earth's orbit, felt something he had not felt in many years. It was not quite worry, but it was close. Something about those humans felt different. He pushed the thought away and went back to his reports. He had 47 successful conquests behind him. Humans would be no different. He was wrong. The planet was nothing like Earth. 2 red suns hung in a purple sky. The air was thin and cold. The training facility stretched across hundreds of miles of bare rock and metal structures. This was where the Empire turned captured aliens into obedient soldiers. Training commander had overseen the processing of 23 different species. He knew the procedure perfectly. New slaves arrived confused and frightened. Within weeks, they learned obedience. Within months, they became useful soldiers. The neural collars helped. These devices wrapped around each prisoner's neck and delivered pain when they disobeyed. Simple, effective. The system had a 94% success rate. The humans arrived in groups of 50. They were separated into different sections of the facility, watched through monitors as they were fitted with collars and assigned to cells. Everything appeared normal at first. Stood in his cell and examined the collar around his neck. It was seamless, no visible way to remove it. He touched it gently and felt a slight vibration, some kind of active technology. He looked around the small room, 3 walls of solid metal, 1 wall of transparent material that let guards look in, a sleeping mat on the floor, a hole in the corner for waste, nothing else. He sat down and waited. Within the first hour, 3 other humans tried to remove their collars. The devices immediately shocked them, heard their screams through the walls. He did not try to remove his own collar. Instead, he memorized the layout of the corridor outside his cell. 6 doors on each side. Guards walking past every 20 minutes. Cameras in every corner. Always watch, always learn. That was what his military training had taught him. Was in a different section, but she was doing the same thing. She counted guard rotations. She noted which doors required hand scanners and which ones opened automatically. She watched what the guards ate, how they spoke to each other, and when they seemed most tired. Every detail mattered. On the 3rd day, the training began. Ordered all humans brought to the central arena. It was a massive open space with walls that rose 100 feet high. 2,000 human prisoners stood in organized rows while guards surrounded them with weapons ready. "You are now property of the Empire," announced. His voice echoed through speakers. "You will be trained as soldiers. You will obey all commands. Disobedience means pain. Continued disobedience means death. Your old lives are over." He waited for the usual response. Most species showed immediate fear. Some begged. Others accepted their fate with silence. The humans did something unexpected. About half of them just stared at him with blank expressions. The other half looked around at each other, making brief eye contact before looking away again. "Begin conditioning protocol," ordered. The training was brutal. Humans were forced to run obstacle courses while guards shocked them randomly. They were made to fight each other in hand-to-hand combat. They received minimal food and water. Sleep was interrupted every few hours. This was meant to break their spirits and make them easy to control. But something was wrong. After 2 weeks, reports showed that 73% of humans were classified as non-compliant. That was impossible. No species had ever resisted this long. Wu was one of those marked non-compliant, but he was not actually resisting. He was being very clever. During physical tests, he sometimes performed perfectly and sometimes failed badly. He wanted the guards to think he was unpredictable and not very smart. Meanwhile, he was watching how their weapons worked. He saw which buttons they pressed to activate their energy rifles. He noticed that the weapons needed to charge for 2 seconds before firing. Details. Everything was about details. Was assigned to medical bay work because of her background. The needed medics, and they were willing to let skilled prisoners work under supervision. This gave her access to areas other humans never saw. She treated injured prisoners and learned the language by listening to guards talk. She also discovered something interesting about biology. Their eyes could see a different range of colors than human eyes. This meant they had blind spots for certain shades that humans could see perfectly. She filed this information away in her mind. The humans were supposed to be isolated from each other, but they found ways to communicate anyway. During meal times in the large cafeteria, they sat at assigned tables under heavy guard. They were not allowed to talk, but discovered he could tap messages on the table in a simple code. 3 taps meant danger. 2 taps meant guard approaching. 1 long tap meant information to share later. Developed a system of hand signals disguised as normal movements. Scratching her ear meant she had learned something important. Touching her collar meant guards were watching closely. Tapping her fingers in specific patterns spelled out simple messages. They noticed none of this. To them, humans all looked similar, and their small movements seemed random. But the humans were building a network of communication that spread through the entire facility. 1 month into training, decided to run a special test. He selected 20 humans, including, and put them in a combat simulation. They would fight against enslaved warriors from another species called the. They were fierce fighters, naturally aggressive and much stronger than humans. The test was supposed to be simple. Humans would lose. Humans would learn they were weak. Humans would accept their place. Stepped into the arena with 19 other humans. On the other side, 20 warriors entered. They were huge creatures, 7 feet tall with thick muscles and sharp claws. They roared challenges at the humans. "Begin," voice commanded. They charged immediately, expecting easy victory, but did something strange. Instead of fighting or running, he stood perfectly still and raised both hands in a specific gesture. It was something he had seen through the monitor in his cell. When fought each other, they made this gesture to signal a death challenge, a formal duel. The lead stopped, confused. Why was this small human using their sacred gesture? What did it mean? The confusion lasted only 3 seconds, but that was enough. Moved fast, using this moment of hesitation to strike at a weak point he had studied. The huge warrior went down. The other humans followed's lead. They did not try to match strength with strength. Instead, they used speed, teamwork, and psychological tricks. They shouted in language. They mimicked battle cries. They attacked in coordinated groups. When the simulation ended, 12 humans were standing. Only 6 remained conscious. Stared at the results in disbelief. This was impossible. Humans were physically weaker. They had only 1 month of training. How had they won? He watched the recorded footage again and again. Then he saw it. The humans had been watching monitors in their cells. They had been studying during previous training sessions. They had learned culture and fighting style. They had prepared for this specific test. Immediately ordered all monitors in cells to be disabled. He separated humans into individual isolation cells with no windows. He increased punishment sessions. But the damage was done. Other species in the facility had watched humans defeat warriors. The other slaves started looking at humans differently. Commander arrived at the facility 2 months after the humans' arrival. He wanted to see the progress personally. Gave him a full report, and it was not good. 38 humans have died rather than obey certain commands, explained. 112 have been classified as faking compliance. We cannot determine which ones are truly broken and which ones are pretending. Physical punishment has no lasting effect. They recover and continue the same behaviors. Watched footage of human training sessions. He saw something that made his skin crawl. In one video, a human woman was being shocked repeatedly for refusing to strike another prisoner. She screamed in pain, but between screams, she was moving her hands in small patterns. She was communicating something to other prisoners who were watching. Even under torture, they were passing information. "What are they communicating?" asked. "We do not know. We have analyzed their hand movements, their eye contact, the patterns of their breathing. Nothing translates to any known language system. It is too subtle for our sensors." Felt that strange feeling again, the one he had felt when leaving Earth. These creatures were doing something no other species had ever done. They were not stronger. They were not smarter in conventional ways, but they were adapting to captivity in ways the system was not designed to handle. Increase isolation protocols, ordered. No human is to have contact with any other human or alien species. They will train individually, eat individually, and sleep in isolated cells. We will break this communication network. But in his mind was beginning to understand something troubling. They had assumed humans would be like every other conquered species, frightened primitives who could be molded into obedient soldiers. But humans were different. They were weak in body but dangerous in ways the Empire had never encountered before. That night in her isolated cell, sat in the darkness and smiled. The thought isolation would break the human network. They were wrong. Isolation would not stop humans. Nothing would, because humans had learned something over millions of years of evolution on a world that tried constantly to kill them. Humans survived by adapting, by learning, by never giving up. They had not captured soldiers. They had captured something far more dangerous. 6 months had passed since the humans arrived at the training facility. Commander decided it was time to deploy them. The Empire was at war with the Coalition, a group of 3 species that had refused to surrender. The war had dragged on for 2 years and needed fresh troops. The humans would be perfect for the most dangerous missions. If they died, no loss. If they somehow succeeded, excellent. Either way, would learn what these strange creatures were really capable of. Stood with 49 other humans in the deployment bay of a military transport ship. They had been given basic armor and weapons. The armor was made for bodies and did not fit properly. The weapons were old models that other slave soldiers had rejected. It was clear they expected them all to die. Was in the same group, so were Wu and. They had not been allowed to see each other during the months of isolation, but now they were together again. None of them spoke. Speaking was forbidden. But their eyes met, and in those brief glances, entire conversations happened. The transport officer addressed them in broken human language. You go to Planet 5. Enemy holds Northern City. You attack. You die for Empire. This is honor. Several humans almost laughed at that. Honor. They were slaves being sent to die, but they kept their faces blank and accepted their equipment. The landing was rough. The transport dropped them directly into a combat zone and flew away immediately. Explosions lit up the sky. Buildings were burning. In the distance, could see forces firing at positions. There were reptilian creatures, smaller than but faster and better organized. A field commander appeared on their helmet displays. Human unit, advance to Sector 7. Draw enemy fire. Other units will flank from the east. Understood immediately. They were bait. They were supposed to run forward and get killed while forces attacked from the side. It was a standard tactic, using slave soldiers as shields. But had other plans. He made a small gesture with his hand. The other humans understood. Instead of charging forward, they spread out and took cover behind rubble. They moved carefully, using proper military tactics. Had been special forces. At least 15 others in this group had military training too. They knew how to fight properly. The commander's voice became angry in their helmets. Advance immediately. This is direct order. Move to a position where she could see the lines through a broken wall. She studied their movements for several minutes. Then she did something that made the others stare. She removed her helmet, stood up where they could see her, and waved a piece of white cloth. "What are you doing?" Wu whispered urgently. "Trust me," said calmly. The firing stopped. There was confusion in their ranks. One of them, probably a commander, approached slowly with a weapon raised. Stayed perfectly still, hands visible, making no threatening moves. The commander stopped 10 feet away. It spoke in its own language, which had learned during her months in the medical bay. "You are slave." "Yes," answered in language. "We are humans. We do not want to fight you. We were taken from our planet, forced to be here." The commander's eyes widened. In 300 years of fighting the Empire, no slave species had ever tried to surrender or negotiate. They just attacked mindlessly until they died. "Why should I believe you?" they asked. "Because I am going to treat your wounded," said. She pointed to several injured soldiers lying behind their barricade. "I am a medic. Let me help them. Then you will know I speak truth." Watched this happen with amazement, was taking an enormous risk, but it was brilliant. The commander was screaming in their helmets now, ordering them to attack, but none of the humans moved. They were all watching to see what would happen. The commander made a decision. It lowered its weapon slightly and gestured for to approach. She walked forward slowly, carrying her medical supplies. The soldiers were tense, but they let her pass. Knelt beside a wounded and began treating a plasma burn. She worked quickly and efficiently, using techniques that clearly showed skill. The wounded made a sound of relief as the pain medication took effect. Saw the opportunity. She stood up and walked forward to join, moving slowly like had done. Then Wu did the same. Soon all 50 humans were standing in the open, showing they were not attacking. The commander was completely confused. This had never happened before. It made a communication call, and within minutes, a higher-ranking officer arrived. This one had translation equipment. "I am Commander," the officer said in rough English. "Explain what is happening here." Stepped forward. "We are humans from planet Earth. They invaded our world 6 months ago. They took us as slaves. They put these collars on us." He pointed to the neural collar around his neck. "If we disobey, the collar causes pain. But the collar does not control our minds. We do not want to fight you. We have no argument with the people." Commander studied them carefully. "But you are attacking our city." "We were ordered to," said. "We were told to charge forward and draw your fire. We were supposed to die so forces could flank your position. We decided not to do that." "The collars will punish you for disobedience," pointed out. "Yes," agreed. "But pain ends, death is permanent. We chose pain over pointless death." Something changed in the commander's expression. It was a look of understanding and perhaps respect. For years, they had fought against slave armies. They had always assumed the slaves were mindless or completely controlled. But these humans were different. These humans chose to resist. The field commander activated the punishment protocol. All 50 neural collars began shocking their wearers simultaneously. The humans fell to their knees, some screaming, others gritting their teeth in silence. The pain was intense, but none of them attacked they just endured the pain until it stopped. When the shocks ended, stood up shakily. Blood was running from his nose. "Will you kill us now?" he asked the commander. Was silent for a long moment. Then it made a gesture to its soldiers. "Lower your weapons. These creatures are not our enemies." The soldiers looked confused but obeyed. The strange standoff continued for several minutes while everyone tried to figure out what to do next. The commander was still screaming orders in the humans' helmets, but they ignored him. Finally, Wu spoke up. "Commander, we can help you. We know tactics. We know their weaknesses. We have been inside their facilities. We can give you information." This was dangerous. This was treason against the Empire. But Wu said it anyway because it was the right thing to do. "Consider this. If you help us, they will execute you." "They will probably execute us anyway," said. "We failed our mission. We refused to attack. We spoke with the enemy. We are already dead by their laws. We might as well die doing something useful." The commander made a decision. It ordered its soldiers to take the humans to a secure location. Within the hour, Wu and the other humans were in a command bunker, giving detailed information about ship layouts, weapon systems, and tactical procedures. Back on the flagship, received reports of what had happened. He read them 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. An entire unit of human slaves had refused to attack. They had negotiated with the enemy. They had switched sides. This was unprecedented. In 300 years, no slave species had ever done this. Immediately called an emergency meeting with his war council. "The humans are compromised," he said. "They cannot be used as soldiers. They must be quarantined." But one of his advisors pointed out a problem. "Commander, we have already deployed human units to 17 different war fronts. We cannot recall them all simultaneously without leaving defensive gaps." Felt a cold sensation in his chest. "How many humans have we deployed total?" "Approximately 12,000, spread across 17 planets." "Contact all field commanders immediately. Order them to isolate human units from all other forces. No contact with enemy forces. No interaction with other slave species. If any human unit shows signs of resistance, execute them immediately. But it was already too late. On 7 different planets, human units were doing exactly what group had done. They were refusing to fight. They were negotiating with enemy forces. They were sharing information about weaknesses. Worse, other slave species were watching. On Planet 5, a unit of enslaved warriors saw what the humans had done. They saw that it was possible to resist. They saw that the enemy would negotiate rather than kill if you approached peacefully. 2 days later, the unit surrendered to forces. They were the first non-human slaves to ever defect. The infection was spreading. On 5 was helping medics set up a field hospital when approached her. "I have a question," the commander said. "Your people knew they would be punished. They knew they might die. Why did you refuse to attack us?" Thought about it carefully. On Earth, we have a saying, just because someone orders you to do something does not make it right. We were ordered to kill you for no reason except that they wanted your planet. That was not right, so we refused. "But you are slaves. Slaves must obey." "No," said firmly. "Slaves must pretend to obey or be punished. But we can choose what we truly believe in our hearts. They can control our bodies with these collars. They cannot control our minds or our choices." Was quiet for a long time. Then it said something that would change the course of the war. "I am going to contact other commanders. I am going to tell them that human slaves can be negotiated with, that they can be allies instead of enemies. Your people have given us a new way to fight the—" Overheard this conversation. He understood the implications immediately. The humans had not just refused to fight. They had started something bigger. They had shown other slaves that resistance was possible. They had shown the enemies that slave soldiers were not mindless weapons. They had weaponized an idea, the idea that things could be different, the idea that you could choose. And ideas knew were more dangerous than any gun or bomb. Ideas could not be killed with weapons. Ideas spread. Ideas changed everything. The emergency meeting of the High Command took place 3 months after humans had first been deployed. Stood before the Council of 12 Supreme Commanders, showing them reports that made no sense by any traditional military analysis. 17 war fronts have been compromised, explained, his voice tight with frustration. Human units refuse to fight. They negotiate with enemies. They share military intelligence. Worse, they are spreading their resistance to other slave species. Supreme Commander Al examined the data. How many defections among non-human slaves? 417 incidents across 12 species, said. They have had 32 units surrender or refuse orders. They have had 63. Even the normally obedient species have shown signs of resistance. Execute all human slaves, another commander said flatly. Solve the problem at its source. I suggested that, replied. But we face a new problem. When we tried to execute human units on 3 planets, other slaves resisted. On 5, a unit actually defended human slaves against forces. We lost 200 soldiers before regaining control. The room went silent. This was impossible. Slave species did not protect each other. They certainly did not attack forces to save other slaves. Al made a gesture of deep concern. What are these humans doing? Are they using some kind of mind control, a biological weapon we have not detected? No, said. We have analyzed everything. Their biochemistry is normal. They have no special abilities. They are actually weaker than most species we have conquered, but they are doing something we never anticipated. They are spreading ideas. Ideas, one commander scoffed. Ideas are not weapons. These ones are, insisted. He brought up footage on the main display. It showed a human female talking to a group of slaves. This is from a labor camp on Prime. The human is named. Watch what she does. In the video, was speaking quietly to 6 workers during a brief rest period. The conversation lasted only 3 minutes before guards moved them apart, but something had changed in the workers' expressions. "What did she say?" Al demanded. Our translators captured most of it. She asked them questions. Simple questions like, "Why do you work for beings who treat you as property? Your species has the numbers to demand better treatment. What would happen if you all refused to work for one day?" "Sedition," Al said. "Nothing we have not handled before." "No," said. "That is where you are wrong. She did not order them to rebel. She did not threaten them. She just asked questions, questions that made them think." Within 2 weeks, productivity in that labor camp dropped by 40%. Workers began asking questions to guards. Guards began questioning their officers. The infection spread. Another commander spoke up. "You are telling us that talking is destroying our empire." "I am telling you that humans are a mimetic weapon," said. "They spread concepts that undermine the foundations of our entire system. Concepts like individual worth, the right to choose, the idea that authority must be earned rather than taken by force." On Planet Prime had indeed been spreading questions, but she was doing it very carefully. She never told anyone to rebel. She never organized resistance. She simply talked to other slaves and asked them to think about their situation. To a worker, she might say, "You are skilled at repairing engines. They need those engines. What would they do if you asked for better food in exchange for your work?" To a miner, she would ask, "How many of you are there? How many guards watch you? What would happen if you simply stopped mining for one day?" These questions planted seeds in minds that had never questioned the system before. The slaves began talking to each other when guards were not watching. They began to realize they had power if they worked together. Meanwhile, in a completely different facility, was creating a different kind of problem. He had been assigned to a maximum security combat training center where only the most dangerous slave warriors were kept. The thought isolation would neutralize him, but had learned something important. He was good at combat, very good, and other slaves noticed. During training exercises, he would demonstrate techniques and other species would watch. He could not talk to them directly, but he could communicate through action. When fighting a larger opponent, would use leverage and speed instead of strength. When facing multiple enemies, he would use the environment and positioning. And always, he would show that victory came from thinking, not just from being stronger. Other warriors began copying his techniques. More importantly, they began to think differently about combat. Fighting was not just about following orders and attacking whoever you were told to attack. Fighting was a skill that required choice and intelligence. Wu had been assigned to equipment maintenance in a military shipyard. The thought this was punishment, but Wu saw it as opportunity. He worked on fighters, bombers, and transport ships. He learned how every system worked, and he began making small modifications. Nothing obvious, just tiny improvements that made engines slightly more efficient or made targeting computers slightly more accurate. The engineers noticed their equipment performing better but could not figure out why. They began asking Wu questions. Wu would answer honestly, explaining the engineering principles behind his modifications, but he would also ask his own questions. Why do you design ships this way when this other way would be more efficient? Who decided that rule? Are you sure it is the best way? The engineers began to think critically about their own designs. They began questioning standard procedures. Some of them started talking about how the rigid military hierarchy prevented innovation. They were thinking thoughts that no loyal should think. Had perhaps the most dangerous assignment. She was working in a medical research facility where she had contact with medical staff. These were educated, not just soldiers. They were intelligent and curious, which made them vulnerable to his weapon. She would work alongside doctors and share medical knowledge. Humans had different approaches to medicine then. Sometimes human methods worked better. The doctors were fascinated. They began asking questions about human science, human culture, human history, and would tell them stories. She would describe Earth before the invasion. She would talk about human art, human music, human philosophy. She would describe the concept of democracy, where leaders were chosen by the people rather than taking power by force. One doctor, a young male named, was particularly interested. He would ask questions during every shift. How did humans decide who would lead? How did you resolve conflicts between groups? What happened if someone abused their power? Answered every question patiently. She never said, "Your system is wrong." She just described how humans did things differently. But the implication was clear. There were other ways to organize society. Began having doubts. He had never questioned the Empire before, were the strongest species in the galaxy. They had the right to rule. That was just how reality worked. But stories made him wonder. If humans could create societies based on cooperation rather than domination, why could not? The infection spread slowly but steadily. Received reports from across the Empire. Slave productivity was down. Loyalty among soldiers was questionable. There had been 12 incidents of officers refusing orders, something that had never happened before in the Empire's history. And at the center of every incident there were humans, not fighting, not rebelling violently, just talking, just asking questions, just existing in ways that made others think differently. The High Command called back to explain the situation in person. He stood before the 12 Supreme Commanders and delivered news that no leader had ever spoken. "We made a fundamental error when we conquered Earth," said. "We assumed humans were like every other species, primitives who could be broken and molded into soldiers. But humans are not warriors by nature." "Then what are they?" Al demanded. "Survivors," said. "Earth is a death world. Their planet tried to kill them with weather, disease, predators, and disasters for millions of years. They survived by adapting, by working together, by questioning everything and finding new solutions. We thought their weakness was physical. We did not see their real strength." "Which is?" "They refuse to accept that anything is unchangeable. They look at any situation and ask, how can this be different? How can this be better? And then they make it happen. We gave them our neural collars. They learned to endure the pain. We gave them our training. They studied us. We sent them to war. They made peace with our enemies. At every turn they adapted in ways we never predicted." "So what do you recommend?" Al asked. Was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that shocked every commander in the room. "I recommend we release the humans immediately, all of them, return them to Earth, pay reparations, and hope they do not decide to spread their ideas deliberately." "Impossible," several commanders shouted at once. "The alternative is worse," said. "Every day we keep humans in our empire, they spread their questions to more slaves, more workers, more soldiers, and even to themselves. Eventually, the entire empire will be infected with the idea that our system is not the only way, that authority must be earned, not taken, that individuals have worth beyond their usefulness." "Those ideas would destroy everything we have built," Al said. "Yes," agreed. "That is exactly what I am saying. Humans are not weapons of war. They are weapons against the very concept of our empire. And we cannot stop them with military force because violence only proves their point that we rule through fear rather than consent." The High Command rejected its recommendation. Instead, they ordered immediate execution of all human slaves. But when the order went out, something unprecedented happened. On 17 planets, soldiers refused the order. On 9 more planets, slave species of all kinds defended the humans. On Prime, Doctor released his human colleague and helped her escape. On 5, forces launched raids specifically to free human prisoners. The empire was breaking, not from military defeat, not from economic collapse, but from the slow spread of an idea. The idea that things could be different, that slaves were people, that power without consent was tyranny. And at the heart of it all were humans. Weak, soft, fragile humans who had somehow weaponized hope. Earth had not been idle during the 8 months since the invasion. The billions of humans left behind had watched their cities burn. They had seen their strongest people taken. They had mourned their losses. And then they had done what humans always did. They adapted. Every piece of technology left behind was studied. Every attack pattern was analyzed. Engineers worked around the clock to understand alien energy shields and plasma weapons. Scientists examined the biological samples from dead soldiers. Military strategists studied the invasion footage frame by frame. But Earth's real weapon was not technology. It was what they learned about psychology from those 8 months of observation. They were rigid. They followed patterns. They expected obedience. They had conquered 47 species using the same methods every time. They had never needed to change because their system always worked. Until now. Earth's first strike came not with weapons but with words. Human ships, hastily modified with reverse-engineered engines, approached alien positions broadcasting messages in language. The messages were simple. We are humans of Earth. Your empire has taken our people as slaves. We know you have honor codes that you claim to follow. We challenge you to prove it. Release our people or face the consequences. But mixed in with these direct messages were other transmissions. Recordings of soldiers who had refused to execute humans. Testimonies from freed slaves of all species describing how they had been treated. Footage of humans helping wounded soldiers. Evidence that not all agreed with the Empire's methods. The psychological warfare was precise and devastating. It targeted the one weakness humans had identified in society, the rigid belief that their way was the only way. By showing that some themselves questioned this, the humans planted doubt. On the main training facility where everything had started, stood in his cell and smiled. He could hear unusual sounds through the walls, confused guards, raised voices. Something was happening. 3 cells down pressed her ear against the cold metal wall. The facility had been on lockdown for 2 weeks. No training, no work details, just isolation. But isolation meant the guards were nervous. Nervous guards made mistakes. In the maintenance section, Wu was still working on ships despite the lockdown. They needed their equipment functional, and he was too valuable to waste. He had spent the last 2 weeks memorizing every detail of the shipyard's layout and schedules. He knew exactly when the guard shifts changed. He knew which doors led to armories. He knew which ships had full fuel cells. He was ready. Had been released by Doctor 2 weeks ago, but she had not run far. She had stayed hidden in the medical facility, moving through maintenance tunnels and supply closets, brought her food and information. He had joined a small group of who questioned the Empire. They were helping humans in secret. "It is time," told her one evening. "Your people from Earth are coming. There will be fighting. You need to get to the slave quarters and help organize." "Why are you helping me?" asked. "You could be executed for this." Made a gesture that had learned meant deep thought. "You asked me once how humans resolved conflicts, how they chose leaders, how they prevented abuse of power. I could not stop thinking about those questions. I realized that I have lived my entire life following orders without asking if those orders were right. You taught me to think. That is a gift I can never repay, so I help." The uprising began at exactly midnight, Standard Time. Later, historians would debate who started it, but the truth was it started everywhere at once. Felt his neural collar suddenly stop vibrating. The power was out. Emergency lights flickered on. He did not wait. He kicked his cell door. The magnetic lock was disabled. The door swung open. All down the corridor, other humans were emerging from their cells. "Follow me," shouted. He had memorized the facility layout months ago. He led 50 humans through corridors toward the armory. They encountered guards, but the guards were confused and disorganized. Most of them did not even fight. They just stood there, unsure what to do when slaves they had controlled for months suddenly acted with confidence and purpose. Reached the armory from a different direction. She had been working on the locks for weeks, scratching tiny marks with a piece of metal she had hidden. Now she put her knowledge to use. The lock clicked open. Inside were hundreds of weapons. She grabbed an energy rifle and tossed others to the humans behind her. "Do not kill unless necessary," she ordered. "We are not murderers. We are people taking back our freedom. Remember that." Wu was already in the shipyard. He had disabled the security systems using access codes he had learned during maintenance work. 5 ships were ready for launch. He began herding freed slaves toward them, humans and others, all moving together. "Anyone who can fly, get on these ships," Wu shouted. "Everyone else, get on board. We are leaving." An officer tried to stop them. Wu did not shoot him. Instead, he said something that made the officer pause. "You can come with us. We are not your enemy. The Empire is. Join us and be free, or stay and be a slave to a system that does not care about you." The officer lowered his weapon. He did not join them, but he did not stop them either. He just stood there thinking. Reached the slave quarters where thousands were still locked up. She had codes from. She opened cell blocks one by one. Slaves poured out into the corridors. Many different species, all looking to her for guidance. "Head to the shipyard," she directed. "Wu has ships ready. Move quickly but stay organized. Help anyone who is injured. We leave no one behind." In orbit above, Earth's fleet arrived. They were not there to attack. Not yet. They broadcast messages directly to the surface. "People of both slave and free, ships are coming to evacuate anyone who wishes to leave. We offer sanctuary to all. No one will be forced. Choose freedom." Commander watched this unfold from his flagship with a terrible sense of inevitability. He had tried to warn the High Command. Now it was happening exactly as he had predicted. The Empire was falling apart not from military defeat, but from the simple question, why should we obey? He received reports from across the Empire. 37 planets had active uprisings. 16 more had peaceful protests. Soldiers were defecting in huge numbers. Some joined the rebels. Others simply refused to fight. The weapon was not plasma rifles or nuclear bombs. The weapon was the idea that you could choose, that you did not have to accept the way things were, that freedom was possible if you just reached for it. Made a decision. He opened a communication channel directly to the flagship of Earth's fleet. A human face appeared on his screen, an older woman with gray hair and tired eyes. "I am commander of the Empire," he said. "I wish to negotiate surrender." The human woman studied him for a long moment. "I am Admiral Park of Earth Defense Force. Why should we trust anything you say?" "Because I understand now what you are," said. "You are not conquerors. You are liberators, not by force but by example. You showed our slaves that resistance was possible. You showed our soldiers that following orders blindly was a choice, not an obligation. You destroyed our empire with ideas we could not fight against." "And now?" Admiral Park asked. "Now I choose to stop fighting," said. "I release all slaves under my command. I order all forces to stand down, not because you have defeated us militarily, but because I have learned something from watching humans. The measure of a civilization is not how well it conquers others, but how it treats those it has power over. By that measure, we have failed terribly." The word spread across the empire. Commander, one of the empire's most successful military leaders, had surrendered, not to weapons, to truth. The empire did not fall overnight, but it transformed. The high command was dissolved. A new system began to form, one where former slaves and negotiated as equals. It was messy. There were disagreements. Some could not accept the change and left to form isolated colonies. But most stayed, most adapted, just like humans had taught them. 3 years after the invasion of Earth, stood on and watched the dedication of a memorial. It was built by humans and 20 other species working together. The memorial honored all those who had died during the Empire's 3 centuries of conquest. Stood beside him, the former Special Forces soldier was now head of the new Federation's military training program. He taught combat but also ethics, history, and philosophy. Soldiers needed to know not just how to fight, but when fighting was justified. "I have a question," said. "When we captured you on Earth, did you already have a plan? Did you know you would do this?" Smiled. "No, we did not have a plan, we just refused to give up. Humans have been fighting against impossible odds for our entire history. Sometimes we lost, sometimes we died, but we never stopped believing we could make things better. That is not a plan, that is just what humans are." Worked nearby as the Federation's chief cultural liaison. She helped different species understand each other and resolve conflicts without violence. It was harder work than military strategy, but more important. Wu ran the Federation's technology development program. He encouraged innovation and creativity. The new ships he helped design were better than models because they incorporated ideas from dozens of species. Established medical centers on every Federation world. She trained doctors from all species, teaching them to see patients as individuals rather than just problems to solve. She also stayed in contact with who had become a leader in society pushing for continued reforms. One evening, asked to meet with all 4 of them. They gathered in a quiet room overlooking the city that had once held them as slaves. "I need to understand something," said. "My people studied you for months. We tried to break you, control you, use you as weapons. We failed. Then your planet came and broke our empire without firing many shots. How? What is the secret of humanity?" The 4 humans looked at each other, finally spoke. "You made a fundamental error," he said. "You thought humans were warriors you could control, but we are not warriors by nature. We are survivors. And we survive by adapting, by connecting with others, by questioning everything, and by refusing to accept that any situation is permanent. You wanted to make us into weapons, but we were already weapons, just not the kind you expected. We weaponize ideas," added. "Hope, freedom, choice, dignity. These things spread faster than any virus. They cannot be killed with plasma rifles or contained with neural collars." "We weaponize cooperation," Wu said. "You kept your conquered species separate because you feared they would unite. We brought them together. Strength through unity is more powerful than strength through domination." "And we weaponize compassion," finished. "We treated your soldiers as people, not enemies. We cared for wounded instead of killing them. We asked questions instead of giving orders. We showed that another way was possible, and once people see a better way, they cannot unsee it." Was silent for a long time, then he said something surprising. "Thank you." "For what?" asked. "For defeating us," said. "For 300 years we have been building an empire on suffering. We told ourselves it was necessary, that we were bringing order to the galaxy. But we were wrong. You showed us that. You defeated us not by being stronger or smarter, but by being better. That is a lesson we needed to learn." Years later, when historians studied the fall of the empire, they would argue about what the true turning point was. Some said it was the first human refusal to fight. Others said it was the spread of questions among the slaves. Still others pointed to Earth's psychological warfare campaign. But those who understood what really happened knew the truth. The turning point was much earlier. It was the moment they decided to capture humans instead of destroying Earth. Because once humans entered the empire, the outcome was inevitable. Not because humans were superior fighters, but because they carried something more dangerous than any weapon. They carried the radical idea that things could be different, that individuals mattered, that freedom was not granted by the powerful but claimed by the brave, that the strong had a responsibility to protect the weak, not exploit them. These ideas spread like fire through dry grass. They could not be stopped with walls or weapons or neural collars. They lived in minds and hearts. They grew stronger every time someone chose courage over fear, compassion over cruelty, hope over despair. In the end, they had been right about one thing. Humans were weapons, but not weapons of war, weapons of change, weapons against tyranny and oppression and the very idea that might makes right. And in a galaxy that had known only conquest for centuries, that made humans the most dangerous species of all.